Well, a very, I don't know if I can say pleasant afternoon to you all across Guyana, because really it's not pleasant times that we're experiencing. So I don't know how to greet you this afternoon, but to say that we're in troubled times and we need to be prepared to deal with the current situation that are facing us in this country. On this afternoon's program, as usual, I have Professor Clive Thomas and Brother Desmond Trotman. Welcome once again to Walter Rodney Groundings.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, a lot of revelations over the past few weeks have been coming forward, but we have gotten it directly from the horse's mouth. Peter Myers himself would have come forward and would have said that the spy equipment that we've had so much talk about would have been bought by Dr. Ramsamy for the government of Guyana. Now, we've had some protests in the parliament. We expect more protests to be taking place. But what is your take on the continued denial of the PPPC administration and especially Dr. Ramsamy in relation to the testimony of Peter Myers and Selwyn Vaughan?
If Ramsamy knew that he was in good ground in denying, he would have moved to curb the press from the time the first report had moved. He would have done that. He could have moved to the court to say, look, I'm being libeled and I want an injunction against all of these media houses until when this thing is disarmed. He could have done so, but he hasn't.
But he could do more than that. He's a United States citizen. Why doesn't he go to the United States and sue Myers for libeling him if he thinks that he might lie? Go to the United States and sue him. He's a United States citizen. We'll deal with that matter later, because his citizenship is a very important part of the equation of how we deal with this problem.
Okay.
So I just want to remind you that he's a citizen of the United States. So let him go to the United States and get a solution to what he said Myers has done to lie in him.
But he could be held criminally accountable in the
let
States.
him go.
Yeah,
let him go.
Right?
Let him go and do the suing for libel.
So the point that I was trying to make is that his hysteria really has to do with the fact that he has very little ground to stand on. And what he's trying to do is to intimidate, because the way in which he's been responding to those questions that are thrown to him is because he's under severe pressure to come up or to deny that he wasn't involved in that matter. And that is why he's taking a position that he is taking.
Yeah, but then we see also that apart from the fact that, well, let's deal with the whole question of the denial of Jack Dio that the spy equipment would have been, in the hand of the government or given back to Roger Khan. How is it that the government, the United States government, how is it that they were able to get hold of the equipment and the Guyana police force should have had it?
But let me say further that there's another matter of fact in that case. Mr. Myers identified the equipment as the equipment he sold, and he's the manufacturer of the equipment.
He sold.
So we can't have any dispute about whether there's another piece of equipment that is the same equipment that exists somewhere. He has identified that as the equipment he sold, and they normally put a code inside the software of all those equipments, which I'm sure he has checked and so as to verify the validity that was the machine that he sold to the government of Guyana. So all along the statement about they having the spy stuff in their possession and all that was another attempt to brazen it out. We never expected that this would unfold. But remember, I told you, the government in that sort of position believes they're invincible. Nothing can come out to shatter their self-confidence. And here it is that, look, he didn't expect 2-3 years down the line, we have a revelation that shows that all these consistent denials were pure hot air.
But remember, Deon, when Jack Dio made the statement, he was smirking. He was he had a look on his face like the chap who drank the milk. And you got to understand that when it is that he acts like that, he's acting deliberately because he's on a path of lying, trying to mislead the public, and so that all that has happened, as Professor Thomas said, is that time has caught up with them, and they don't know how to really deal with this matter. And so what they'll be doing, they'll be lying more and more and actually sinking themselves deeper into a hole.
Yeah, but this government adopts a strategy on any information that they consider negative to them, of just denying it and asking you to prove it. So the burden of proof is now on you if you make an allegation against them. That's their standard tactic for dealing with all these situations. They may stand up here and say, make any statement about any other government in a normal way, making a value judgment about that government. But when it comes to them, people can't do it unless they can prove it, or unless their value judgment is a positive judgment.
Yeah, but one of the things that we need to remember also before we deal later on with other pertinent questions is the position taken when the equipment would have been seized by the Army. Now, who could have instructed the Army to give back the equipment? Roger Khan could have done that? How did it get back into their possession?
I don't know how it happened myself. I really don't know. But it shows the United States government had a lot more control of activities in here than even the government knows. Because to put the best interpretation on it, they probably believe they have the equipment, but it was not the equipment.
No, but I'm thinking that Jagdeo said when the equipment would have been seized by the Army was instructed to give it back. All right? But the Army would not have responded to that kind of instruction except it had come from some person who would have had the authority.
Yeah, the commandant.
Yeah, right. To give them that kind of direction. All right? So the fact that it went back to Roger Khan so that Simmels could have gotten it, and now the U.S. government could have taken possession of it, also implicates,
yeah,
the chief.
But you see, what might have happened is that, but it implicates, you say, the chief of...
The
command-in-chief.
The command-in-chief.
Yeah, but it could also implicate the security forces, because it's quite possible that they might have given it back to the security forces, and in turn it leaked from there back to Roger Khan. And in turn, he's trying to get it out of the country by his lawyer. That's one possibility. I mean, it may be a slight possibility, but that's one possibility consistent with his statement being truthful. That's just one possibility.
But then we come to the fact that also coming out of the testimony in the trial there of the lawyer Simmels is the fact that Roger Khan was responsible for the killing of Ronald Waddell and also Donald Addison. And that...
Among others.
Among others. It also points to the fact that Dr. Ramsamy colluded with Roger Khan in these executions. So where does that put the government?
Well, what I find strange, and it shows the nature and the shallowness of the thinking of this government. Their line of defense is that if we believe Selwyn Vaughan saying that Roger Khan did all these terrible things, we have to believe him when he says that Ronald Waddell consorted or was part of a criminal gang. Now, they fail to realize two things. One is Roger Khan is a self-confessed drug runner. Ronald Waddell has never appeared in a court of law and has never been convicted for any criminal association with any criminal gang. That's point number one. Secondly, your human rights comes to you as a person, as a human being. They're not contingent on whether you're a criminal or not. So to even raise that defense in any serious court is to invite culpability, because you can't come and say that the person was associated with a criminal gang, so I don't responsible if it's civil rights or if he's murdered because he's part of a criminal gang. The fundamental law of human rights is that the rights come to him first as a human being, and if he subsequently turns out to be a criminal or an innocent people, they're equally human rights to him. So you can't, because of that, negate the fact that he has a right not to be summarily executed by extrajudicial forces that have the protection of the law and order within the country and now being sanctioned by the political directorate.
So, Trotman.
And what is worse, Deon, is when the president of the country stands before the nation and announces that he loses no sleep over the fact
when criminals get killed.
I mean...
But they don't understand the fundamentals of human rights.
It is just amazing.
I cannot imagine somebody
You
could make
cannot
a statement
equate
that.
Ronald Waddle to a man, Roger Khan, who put a full page ad in the papers that said, look, I've done these things, and all of these things that I've done in the interest of safeguarding this government.
No, but even apart from that, but I'm still making the further point that Ronald Waddle is not tried in any judicial court and convicted and therefore sentenced to execution. So no extrajudicial force used against him is considered legitimate and considered unlawful. And for the president of a country to sanction that and said, I don't care what happens to criminals, is to admit culpability in the denial of the human rights of citizens within Guyana. That's what you have to recognize. Human rights are not just for the convenience of certain people, it's the convenience of all human beings. And that's the fundamental rule, fundamental law from which we start. And the thing what I'm saying about this regime is that it does not understand the basic civil, decent things that they ought to be representing. And they make foolish statements that not only embarrass them personally, but embarrass them politically. Because there are many people who I know are working with foreign agencies who have called me in amazement that the government, the president can be allowed to get away with statements like that. Well, if he doesn't know what human rights are.
He can get away with it in Guyana, but are we going to allow him to get away with it? That's the question that we need to ask.
But that's why we'll be talking about it now.
No.
And I was glad that Brother Trotman mentioned that there are going to be some protest activity and it's going to be, I think, starting. But it started already outside the Parliament. I think it's going to be continued tomorrow.
But if we look at, we're talking about Donald Allison, Ronald Waddell, they were prominent persons.
But the other people were killed.
What about the 200 other persons who were killed and are obviously, in light of what the president would have said, they are of no importance, that the fact that Roger Khan, acting on their behalf, eliminated all these persons is of no consequence to Jack Deon and his administration. How do we take that kind of, the fact that they were young black people in particular.
But they probably want to extend the argument and say most of them were members of criminal gang. They probably won't claim, and they can't ridiculously claim, that all 200. So they don't mind killing a few innocent people. They will probably claim the bulk of them were members of a criminal gang. But you see the mentality and where it leads you. This is the basis from which fascism comes. And this is the basis that you have to fear once the state is criminalized. And crime fighting between two separate gangs becomes this rule of law instead of the rule of law supervising and superintending the governance of the whole society. The rule of law is which criminal set is able to dominate the other and establish its rules.
Yeah, but they acted on the what basis? You just said, our brother Trotman said, you also pointed out, Professor Thomas, that the way the PPP operates is to throw the burden of proof upon those who are accusing. Now, what proof did they have? Can they present us with this proof that they had?
They do have no proof. They're the government.
Were criminals.
As long as they label you, that's enough. That's the way in which the government functions. If they label somebody as a criminal group, they're a criminal group, as far as they're concerned.
And so they take action to
do whatever they want. If I listened to a program last night, I could not imagine that at this point in time, with all that's happening in the country, I could hear people sit down and discuss things in a way which it had no bearing to any sort of political or social reality I can recognize in Guyana, or any of the persons I deal with, accept as part and parcel of what's happening in Guyana. I heard a discussion on so-called political adventurism. There's no recognition on the part of any of the speakers of the predicament that they and the country they put us into right now.
We look forward to next week's program, when we can really say that positive things are happening in Guyana. Do enjoy the rest of your evening.